Hello, this is Janet Gowan welcoming you to Love Letters Live. And is today's guest's life is a lesson in so many things that I just hope we can cover it all in one Love Letters Live episode here. I want to introduce Steve Taibbi. And Stephen, why don't you, in how we address each other, I should really call you Emperor, correct?
I can't get my wife to do it, but I got you to do it. That's great.
Yes, it's harder to get wives to do things than strangers. So let me just introduce you. And I will say that you've accomplished so much in life, but one of the things that we're going to talk about is the fact that you are a survivor of 2 heart transplants.
Yes.
And I understand that your first heart surgery was right after you were born.
Yes, I've had a total of 4 open heart surgeries in my life. 2 of them were heart transplants, but when I was 5 and 6, I was the first person in the world to survive 2 operations for ASD repair.
And was, did that change your family?
Oh yeah.
Can we talk about, I think the fear of having a child who we're told may not live has got to be life-changing, disrupting. What did that do to your mother and father, if you know?
It was nothing short of a bomb going off in the center of our household. I was 5 when I got my first diagnosis. And
what was the first diagnosis then?
That I had a grossly enlarged heart. And then they found out that was caused because I had ASD, atrial septum defect, which really means, back in the day, they used to call that a hole in the heart, which is a hole between the 2 walls of the atrium. And so, I was given well under a year to live once that was diagnosed. And it just turned my mother into this protective mama bear.
Oh, sure.
And she just went completely nuts as far as I was concerned. And she started building a fence around her and me. And she wouldn't let the other members of the family in, and she wouldn't let me out.
Oh.
It was very disruptive. In many ways, she saved my life, but in many ways, she ruined the family doing that.
Is that right? Yeah. That's so understandable. That is so.
It is.
Yes. Now, one of the things that I know people say about you is that you were living with an expiration date.
Yeah, many times.
The truth is, we're all living with an expiration date. For most of us, it's kept secret. Apparently, it was for you too.
Well, I was told, my parents were told twice that I had a year to live. And I've been told personally 3 times that I had a year to live. So in my lifetime, I've been told 5 times that I have a year to live. I always, I love my doctors. I love doctors, but when they tell me something like that, I never believe them. I'm always like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong.
By the way, that's not up to them to say how long you have to live.
Well, usually they're right, but they ran into me, and I have a very strong will, and ever since the age of 5, I realized at the age of 5 that I was in this by myself. I mean, I may have been in a hospital, there may have been doctors and nurses, my parents and all that, but when you're alone in the hospital, except for an hour a day with visiting, you realize you're doing this by yourself. There's nobody else. And even at the age of 5, I realized I was in this by myself, and it was up to me.
You're saying at the age of 5, you had an awareness of what was happening to you.
Absolutely. How could you not? I mean, you're having major surgery. You're watching other children die. You're in this ward with all these children, and things were very different back in the 50s when I was first hospitalized.
Sure.
And I just came to an awareness that it was up to me. Now, at the age of 5, I was not very competent in building my strategies, but I did build a strategy that got me through it.
What was the strategy? What was the strategy at age 5?
Well, today we would call it disassociation. But what I did was I found a cave in my psyche that I climbed into. And when I was in that cave, nothing hurt. They could do whatever they wanted to my body, which they did plenty of things. They could alter my body. They could do all the things they wanted to do. And I didn't feel it. Now, of course, what?
Well, did you go through times of actual physical pain recovering from surgery? There must have been.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I mean, there were times when disassociation just wouldn't work.
Uh-huh.
But for all the times that I did disassociate, for all the times that I pushed that pain aside, I didn't realize that I was building my own time bomb for myself, because that pain goes someplace. And it's literally true that I never cried, not once, during those 2 years when I was 5 and 6 getting those operations. And it's literally true that I barely spoke at all when I was in the hospital. I just held it all in. I didn't even say ouch. I never even said ouch once when I was in the hospital, no matter how much they hurt me.
You said that has to come out somewhere. Where did it come out for you?
Well, it became a thing where I internalized everything, and I thought that I was no good, and I thought that everybody would see it. The family was falling apart. That was my fault. Everything was my fault, and I believed that to the deepest part of me, and it turned into self-sabotaging behaviors that took me a long time to get a handle on.
Apparently you did, though, because I know that you had your own production company. I mean, you were incredibly productive. You did a lot. How did that come about? Can you tell us a little bit about the television work you did?
I love television. When I got into it, I started my business as a freelancer. I started my business 2 weeks before I graduated. And
College?
Yeah, I graduated at New York Institute of Technology.
And were you a photographer? What was your?
I was a cameraman. I started out as a gaffer.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I mean, I started at the bottom. I started in my internship sweeping floors and coiling cable, and then when I got my first gig, which was with the AT&T, which was the largest studio network in the world at the time. They had 70 studios just in America, and that's where I started as far as professional. And I started being a gaffer.
So I have a kind of an observation. You can say whether it's right or wrong, but the fact that you were starting at the bottom and sweeping floors was kind of an indication that you knew you had time to rise.
Yeah, well, at that point, when I was starting this, I had an expiration date on me put by the doctors. I had already lived through one. I had a near-death, I had an NDE, near-death experience on my 17th birthday. And I was told that my parents were told that I wouldn't get past 10. But that thing didn't happen until my 17th birthday.
Would you tell us what a near-death experience is and feels like?
Well, people call it an out-of-body experience, that whole thing. And when I had mine, it was before Kubler-Ross had written her book on death and dying. So everything that I experienced was unique to me in the sense that I'd never heard of a light. I'd never heard of any of the things of rising out of your body. But I never heard of any of those things. They just happened to me. And in retrospect, it was the best birthday I ever had. I'm extremely grateful for that birthday. But it was, did you want me to go through that experience? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about what that was actually like.
Well, they had given me a drug. I had just come back from a surgery. I had just come back from cardioversion, which is where they electrocute you and stop your heart, because my heart was running rampant. There's a node on your heart that regulates the beating of your heart, and that node was damaged during my second surgery.
Oh.
So my heart and my brain had disconnected, literally, and the heart was just beating on its own, and my normal resting heart rate was over 170.
Whoa.
And my doctor told me to my face, "You're lucky if you have a year here, and your heart's just going to kill itself." So they did a catheterization. they found out what the problem was. They found out it was electrical. There was nothing else going on. And they put a plate on your chest and a plate on your back, and they zap you and they stop your heart. And they wait for a few minutes so that, hoping that the brain and the heart node, the node on your heart that controls the beating, would reconnect. And it was also a guess that they could restart me. Apparently they did.
Sure.
And my heart rate was 86, 84 when they restarted me. So it had been successful. But then they put me on a drug called quinidine, which was at the time cutting edge stuff. It's a quinine derivative. And I was absolutely compliant about taking this drug, absolutely. And on my 17th birthday, I woke up. I really had slept late, and I couldn't. This is all in my book, Grateful Guilt.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and they and I just couldn't wake up. I finally woke up. My mother thought I was just sleeping late because I'm a night owl anyway, and she called me sleepyhead, and I walked into a wall.
Oh.
And yeah, and that was my mother. My mother was a nurse. She grabbed me. I almost fainted in her arms.
Oh,
She walked me to the closest chair, and my pulse was in the 40s, and that's dangerous. And she called the doctor. He said he's having an allergic reaction to the quinidine.
Oh.
My mother was ready to just rush me. He said, "Don't move him. Put him in bed. If we do anything, it could push him over the edge." So my mother laid me down, and she starts crying. And now I'm comforting my mother, and all the alarm bells in my head are going off. And I honestly, to this day, this is one of the biggest miracles of my life. I needed to get rid of my mother because I knew that I was about to do battle. I knew it. And I just knew it. And I needed to get rid of her. I was consoling her. And
Right.
and so I just finally said something to her. I don't remember what I said. And my mother went, okay, and got up and left. That is a miracle. And so shortly after that happened, it was like somebody took a sledgehammer and slammed it in my chest. I jumped up off the bed. It was so hard and so violent. And then there was another one, but each blow was successively a little less. But, I'm laying on the bed, and I was like, okay, Stephen, how are you going to get out of this one? This is it. And then I heard a click, and all the pain stopped. And at the moment of that click, like in cartoons, when things separate, but they go boing, right? That's exactly what it felt like. And next thing I know, I'm looking down at me, and me on the bed is looking up at the ceiling, but it sees that I see me. I had two consciousnesses. I had two thought processes, and they diverged at a point, but I never lost consciousness, which is an important part of this. And I just started rising. I'm rising and rising. And it was wonderful. I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And I was like, oh, all right, if this is death, let's go. I'm fine. And really, I was all set to go because it was so peaceful, just so peaceful. And then I went through the ceiling, I went through the roof, and I could see my mother talking to our neighbor. And and then shortly after I went through the roof, I just got enveloped by the blackest black I'd ever seen. And I'm still rising. And then way up to the right is a light. And it's the brightest light I've ever seen, but so far away that it was gray, if you can imagine that. So it's the brightest light I've ever seen, but it was grayish. And it was just gorgeous. And all you wanted to do was get to that light. I didn't see a tunnel. Everybody talks about a tunnel. I think, well, from my experience, it must be like when you shine a flashlight in a dark thing, it forms its own tunnel. But I didn't see a tunnel. I saw the light. And next thing I know, I'm slowing down, and I know that can't be good. And I'm slowing down. As I'm slowing down, it's getting so cold. First of all, it was the blackest black I've ever been in. I mean, if you could bury me in a box underground, and this would be blacker. And the cold was the coldest cold I've ever experienced. And by the way, I don't talk about this that often. This might be the first time I'm talking about this in 6 or 7 years. And I'm noticing how cold it is. And then I'm noticing that it's crowded. I mean, like crowded, like everybody's like this. Now, I can't see anything, but I could feel everything.
Mhm.
And I could tell that there were people all around me, surrounded me like a Japanese commuter train. And everybody's teeth are chattering from how cold it is, but nobody has teeth. I mean, it was the weirdest, it's just telling you how it was. And and now I'm thinking back to, people have the word hell is a Greek word. And that word means absence of light.
Mhm.
And now suddenly, and then, I'm thinking about parts of the Bible that I've read where the gnashing of teeth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the gnashing of teeth.
Really? I never
Yeah.
heard that.
What?
I never heard that.
You never heard? Oh, trust me, it's in there. And so I'm going, this is the gnashing of teeth. It's ice cold. It's horrible. And I'm like, is this hell where you get to see this light that you want to get to, but you're stuck here in this cold blackness with all these people who are suffering? And I'm like, what the heck did I do? I'm only 17. I certainly hadn't murdered anybody, and I couldn't understand why I was there. And then I felt a parting of ways, like a way a cop can move through a crowd. It was like that. And something came up to me. And this is the thing, I've always described it this way, in a voice I never heard before, but I recognized. Came up to me and felt like it put its hand on my shoulder, even though I didn't have a shoulder. And its really pleasant, sonorous voice said, no, go back. You're not ready yet. That's the quote.
Oh.
Right. And the part of me that was on the bed, because I somehow communicated to the part of me that was on the bed that I had to go back, that part of me was blissful too. And I actually out loud said, oh, blank, because I didn't want to go back. And I owe this, I think, to divine inspiration, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. How was I supposed to get myself started again? My arms were at my sides. And the only thing I could think of doing the only thing I could think of to do, I flung my arms across my chest as hard as I could. It was the last moment. It was the only thing I had left in me. And next thing I know, I heard my heart beat. Now my blood had been stasis for quite a while. I don't know how long, but it was a while. And that first heart pump, every cell of my body felt that. And it was like,
And so that's when you knew you were back in your own body.
With every pump, it was very irregular. With every pump, I came lower. Pump, beat. Everyone I kept getting lower until there was my mother talking to Mr. Lewis again, and there was my feeling. Then I went through it, and then I went face to face with me, and then I heard that click, and I was whole again. Now I tested this with my mother, and I said to her, "Were you in the backyard?" Now you cannot see where my mother was from that room. And I said, were you in the backyard? And she goes, yes. I go, were you talking to Mr. Lewis? Yes. Was he wearing Madras shorts, a polo shirt, and sandals with socks? Yes. Was he holding a hedge clipper? Yes. That's how I knew that it really happened.
Yes, I can understand. That's how you know it really happened. There's too many mysteries in life. Now you have an audio book.
Yes.
Right? Called, you tell us.
Grateful Guilt, Living in the Shadow of My Heart.
And how can your whole experience is in this book, and I'm gathering that you did this for the sake of others.
Yes, that was really the reason for writing the book. I used my story as an analogy. It's my whole, including all the bullying and everything with the family, because I'm trying, when people in a family, when a person in a family suffers a profound illness, such as mine, it affects the entire family, and it affects each person differently. The person who's sick is affected, and the people who are around that person are affected, but they're all affected differently. Yeah. And it was my hope that by writing down my experiences and by saying how I cope with them, other people could be at least aware of them. And I started out really developing strategies to survive with. And I think that people go into hospitals or get sick and feel very helpless. and don't understand the internal power that they have.
Okay,
I'm nothing special. I'm nothing special. I just happen to figure this out. That's all. So I'm hoping that if you're a person who's sick, that you can read this book and it'll help you understand the way the person who's sick is. That if you're the sick person, that you'd read this book and understand how your family is reacting, but also what you can do to save your own life. Now, I give all my strategies, from how I survived, how I got rid of, how I beat bullies finally, all the things that I've done in my life. I've always used strategies. And I'm not saying that somebody should use my strategies. I'm just hoping that by reading what my strategies were, they may go, oh, I could use this of their own making, just to give them the idea that they can do that.
I'm wondering if, part of the benefit of your book, you talk about families being hurt by this, that parents could maybe see that the pressure and the anger that they're feeling and the torment doesn't need to rip them apart.
Right. That exactly. And a lot of this is going to be tough to say, but I'm going to say it because it's true.
Please.
A lot of times parents will overindulge a child who's sick.
Yes.
Or and like my mother did my father, ignore him and his needs for me.
Yes.
And that's not fun. And so you can imagine the resentment my father had towards me and my siblings had towards me. Mm-hmm. And I always thought it was understandable because I had the resentment towards my mother too,
Right.
But the reality is that when people get like that, they're really honestly not doing it for the person who's sick. They're doing it for themselves.
Sure.
That's the reality. And people who overindulge their children, which is rampant nowadays, and people who do those kind of things and act like it's their own self-sacrifice. No, you're doing that for your own benefit.
Let me ask you something. At what point after this? So you went on to live, you worked in many TV shows that we all know about, right?
Yeah.
And why don't you say a couple of what they are? The reason I'm asking you this, to look at you, I don't know what I expected, but you look like such a robust, healthy person.
Well, I eat right. I exercise an hour a day. I just turned 69.
Wow.
And no doctor, nobody I ever went to school with ever thought I went to my 30th anniversary and people literally were like, you're alive, literally. So, because I had that thing when I was 17, when I was in the 11th grade.
Well, but I'm guessing you have the benefit of, as you say, a very strong will, ways of kind of ensuring your own survival, at least day by day, and a brilliant medical team.
Oh yeah, I really have had great doctors. I've been very fortunate.
So at what point were you told that you needed to have a heart transplant, heart replacement?
Oh man, that was a tough one because I had the same doctor since I was 16, and he was the first one to tell me to my face that I had a year to live. That was before that incident when I was 17.
If you didn't have the transplant.
No, this is way before the transplant.
Oh, okay.
My first transplant wasn't until I was 37.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So
yeah.
how did you come about knowing that you needed that?
Well, I had this doctor, and he had told me that I had a year to live. Then after I survived that thing when I was 17, he told me I'd be lucky if I got out of my 20s, the same doctor. And here I was 33, almost 34. And he says to me, I don't know how you did it, but your EKG is indistinguishable from a normal person's. He said, you beat it, go out and live. That's what he said to me.
And you got married, you're married, right?
I am married, yeah. I got married late though, because I was enjoying myself. Anyway, so.
Hey, good for you.
I know. We both got married late. Both our first marriage. This month is 31 years for us. Next week, as a matter of fact, will be 31 years for us. But so I went out and bought a glider to celebrate my health. But and then I got married when I was 37, and just a few years later, like 8 years, I started to decline, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I went for tests. They ruled out my heart,
Uh-huh.
and it turned out that it was my heart, and my heart was had caught a virus.
Oh,
So it had nothing to do with my childhood. It had nothing to do with my previous operations. I just had caught a virus, and it was killing my heart, and which is not as uncommon as you would think it is. And that's why I lost my heart, having nothing to do.
oh my
And
goodness.
What?
That's surprising, of course.
Right. And I always look at that as that's a real lesson in life, because, God laughs at plans,
Yeah.
and
Plans, God laughs. I've heard that.
who was it who said that, God is a comedian, but playing to an audience that's too scared to laugh. And frankly, I thought that was hilarious. I really did. I got the joke. I thought it was hilarious. But now I'm being told I have a year to live because I need a new heart. And I was at, it was called North Shore in Long Island at the time. My wife was there as a nurse. She's a chemo nurse there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to their top guy, and he said, "Oh, you have 10 years." And my wife didn't believe him, and I didn't believe him. And my wife called a friend of hers who used to work with her, who was now working for one of the finest doctors in heart failure in the world. Her name is Donna Mancini, and she was at the time at Columbia. And I went to see her, and after we said hello to each other, she looked at me. These are her first words to me. After she said hello, she said, "You were told you have about 10 years." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You're lucky if you have one."
Oh my goodness.
She's a very blunt woman. She's the best, though. I love Donna, man. I love her. Best doctor, best doctor. I'm alive because of her. And man, seriously, I just love her. And
let me ask you, because we're gonna run. You have more to say than we can do in one episode. And I'm just wondering, because I want to get to the complexities of the actual transplant and your relationship with two donors. May I just invite you to come back to do another one?
Absolutely. I would love that.
And we're going to just, we're just going to be so informed by all you have said. I do want to get to the importance of letter writing. But I wanted to mention two things that you had said that I found so interesting. And that is, tips for how to get through this. And one of the things you said was that you should wear your own clothes in the hospital.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought that was so interesting because, the first thing, and you have to give up everything and turn in everything, and you're just a naked human being in a hospital, Johnny, with no real identifying marks.
Nothing to make you a person.
That's right. You've been kind of stripped of your humanity.
Yes.
Which leaves you vulnerable to other people's needs and plans.
Right. And so you have to wear a shirt like this, a button-down shirt that they can get to easily. And I would wear like sweat bottoms. Right. And I had a doctor in Cedars-Sinai tell me, he said, I want to do a study on this because he goes, because you're right. Patients who wear street clothes get treated differently than patients who wear hospital gowns.
Really?
Because there's a subconscious thing. Oh, here's a person.
Isn't that okay? That is so worth everybody's knowing.
Absolutely. You go to the hospital, you wear your own clothes. There are certain times when you can't.
Sure.
But if you're in a regular hospital room, if they can get access to you as easily as they could if you had a gown, they have no problem.
That's a good point. Okay, I like that. And the other thing is, you talk about being nice to absolutely everybody.
Yes, it's a big key. It's a big key. Every single person who comes into your room is helping save your life. Whether it's the janitor, whether it's the woman who comes in to clean up the beds after the other person leaves, whether it's the person delivering your food, the phlebotomist, the x-ray techs, the nurses, the doctors,
Of course.
anybody who comes into your room.
If
Ask them their names,
yes,
ask about their families,
yes.
get to know them.
So ask about their families, you're establishing kinship.
Yes. And now they want to, so instead of being the jerk who starts yelling, do you know who I am? And and I've heard a lot of that in the hospitals. I'm like, man, you're a moron, or woman, you're a moron, because how much do you think they want to work on you now? Right? You want to make it so they want to help you. That's the secret. Make it so they want to help you.
They want you to live.
They want you to live. Yeah.
Yes.
Make your room the room they look forward to going into.
That is so smart and so nice.
Yes, it's so nice and it's so pleasant. And then, I had nurses on the late shifts coming in, talking to me about their boyfriends and about, it was unbelievable. They would come in, the male nurses would come in and tell me about their new BMW. It was like, they just wanted to talk.
Oh, that's just so critical and so important. It's such a beautiful thing to hear. Well, I want to thank you for doing this with me today.
Oh, sure. I enjoyed it.
And I want to, thank you. I want to tell everyone who's listening and watching and seeing this, that we will be back soon for part 2 of the story, which is the actual transplant. Why 2 of them? And yes, the relationship, some really interesting things about the relationship between you and, I'm guessing, both donors. Okay, we have a lot more to talk about. We'll be back soon. Thank you,
Sounds
dear.
Great.
I look forward to seeing you again, and just may you live to 120.
Thank you so much. And you too.
Thank you. Yes, I'm hoping to join that small group. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, dear.